Hello, welcome back to the Money Puzzle with Eric Douglas and Aaron McAndrew. Appreciate your time here. And yeah, thanks for joining us once again. Today we have, I think, a topic that's really important to me anyway. Right. I'm sure it's probably important to you as well. But today we're talking about why DIY, do-it-yourself financial planning, can ultimately cost you quite a bit in the long run. And we've seen so many different stories, and we were going over a few of them as we were preparing the content for today's episode of real-life examples that we've seen where people have tried to go it alone, do it themselves, and they always end up in our office at some point or another because not necessarily everything they did was done poorly, but it wasn't done professionally, or there was something, you make one mistake in a retirement plan and it can really cost you quite a bit of money.
Yeah, it seems like this topic comes up quite a bit. I feel like we've talked about this several times before, but it always happens, whether they're into our office, and don't realize that they've done, things that maybe could have impacted their plan and made their plan a little different had they done something differently, or we're pointing something out to them and then they're like, oh, never thought about that or whatnot. So some of the things we're going to talk about today, or some of the examples we're going to give you today, are reasons why DIY is not the best way to handle your retirement plan.
Yeah, and it's always interesting because one thing I've really learned being in this business for well over a decade now, but something that I've really learned and that was very instructive to me was the fact that really our biggest competition is advisors. You would think that, all different advisors are competing against each other and, it's us versus them when it comes to other types of firms like ours. I really don't think that's the case. I think the biggest issue that most people have is actually using an advisor in the first place, that DIY mentality. I can do it myself. I don't need anyone. Why would I pay someone? That's probably the big thing, right? I've already made this money. I made it, on my own. I didn't need any help making this money. But so many people don't truly realize that accumulation is far different than income. It's far different than living off of the money that you spent an entire lifetime saving and accumulating. And it's a different strategy. It's a different skill to be able to create a DIY financial plan, if you will. And that's really where you need professional help.
Right. That as well as protecting it, protecting what you've built and then passing on what you've built, whatever's left from your plan or from your assets to your heirs.
So that's probably a good segue there, right? So one of the biggest issues that we see, and I'll let you take this away with some of the biggest issues that we see when it comes to a DIY financial planning is, in this case, let's call it a lack of planning, specifically as it relates to estate planning.
Right. Yeah, most of the time when we see DIY or we think about DIY is we see usually as people that are just looking at their investment portfolios, whether it be a retirement account and they, if they've got a 401k or whatnot, and you look at their 401k plan and we're looking at their statement and their investments, they may be in 3 or 4 different target retirement date funds. You see a 2030, a 2035, a 2040, and really they don't know exactly what the purpose of those target retirement date funds are. They just kind of chose different ones because they believe that all of their eggs are not in one basket there, when the reality of it is they could just choose one that's more in line with what their time horizon would be, and that would be just fine. A lot of times we also see them choose the lowest cost funds possible. So, we see them focus on Vanguard a lot because Vanguard's the lowest cost funds that are there, and they may choose multiple index funds, and unfortunately all the index funds that they would look at if they're choosing multiple index funds may all be large cap. So they're not diversified at all. So when the market, when large cap's swinging up, they're looking really, really good. When large cap's swinging down, they're looking really, really bad. But the thing they're focused on is they're only paying 0.03%, on that cost, and it's really just the same. But there's a lot of overlap.
So it's funny you say that because I've seen portfolios that clients have brought in where someone will have a Schwab S&P 500 fund, a Fidelity S&P 500 fund, and a Vanguard S&P 500 fund, and it's like, well, they think that they're diversified because they have monies with 3 different companies.
Right.
When in reality, if you buy the S&P 500 index fund from 3 different companies, you're still in essence buying basically the exact same fund, and there's really no diversification between the 3.
Right. And along those lines, I ran into, I was in a meeting about 2 or 3 months ago, and this person that I was meeting with had about 6 different Roth IRAs. And believe it or not, they weren't all annuities. Like, a lot of times you'll see that and it'll be a different annuity that
somebody sold them something. Yeah.
Exactly. This person was actually in 6 different Roth IRAs, because their answer when I asked them, well, why do you have so many different Roth IRAs? It was, I don't want all my eggs in the same basket. I want to spread them around. But when you looked at all the different Roth IRAs, they were basically invested the same. So you had S&P 500 index funds from Vanguard and Fidelity, and then you had the American Funds Growth Fund of America that was in there, and both of the Roth IRAs as well, or 2 or 3 of the Roth IRAs. There just was a whole bunch of overlap, and you had to explain that, look, while these are at different companies, your eggs are all in one basket essentially, because you're not diversified.
So you're absolutely spot on. So we talked about how most people will go look to just buy index funds because that's what they've always been told. When you look at most DIY financial investment related advice, it usually refers to just go buy the cheapest funds, on an index and you're set, which is very, very generic advice. But another mistake I see quite a bit, especially in 401k plans, you see this a ton of 401k, 403b, other employer retirement plans, is the use of target date funds, which in and of itself, I don't want to make this specifically about target date funds and whether they're good or bad, but using multiple target date funds in a way to feel like you are more or less diversifying your portfolio within a 401k plan. Talk about how you're absolutely not achieving that goal if you're using multiple target date funds.
Yeah, the purpose of a target date and retirement date fund is it really, a lot of most retirement plans, those are the default investments inside of those plans. They're in there, and they're in most all retirement plans, and they're more of a sit it and leave it fund for someone who knows they want to be invested, and they know that they're going to continue to contribute to the plan, or the company's going to continue to contribute to the plan, but they just don't know how to pick the funds. So what they're time-based funds that will become more conservative the closer to the date that's on that fund. However, not all target date funds are built the same. So some of the lowest cost target date funds are mainly invested in index funds inside that target date fund. So if somebody was going to retire in 2035, and their portfolio may have a 2025, a 2030, a 2035, a 2040, and a 2045 target retirement date fund, you might as well just put all of that in. If you want to be in a retirement target date fund, you might as well put all of that portfolio in that 2035 fund, because that's really set to where you are. While the 2045 may remain a little bit more aggressive on that end, you're more conservative on the 2025 fund. So you're really invested if it's the same family of all target retirement date funds. All there is that the difference is the allocations are either more exposed to the stock market or less exposed to the stock market. So essentially you have the same investments through here, and if you're putting in a 2025, a 2030, a 2035, a 2040, and 2045, you might as well just be where your time horizon is. So you're not making this, you're not spreading out this by having those multiple investments. You're not doing yourself any favors.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also interesting to note, too, that when you use target date retirement funds, especially within the same retirement plan, let's say it's, Fidelity target date funds, right? And you're using 3 or 4 different Fidelity target date funds. Each one of those target date funds are typically managed by the same team of fund managers.
Correct, yeah.
You're going to have the same underlying holdings across all of those funds. Now, you're going to have different allocations. So the stocks versus the bonds within that specific fund are going to be different across each of the different target date funds, but you're still ultimately holding the same stocks and the same bonds, just in different allocations. So if the idea is to diversify, and once again, this is just a very, very common misconception, I've got more funds, so I'm more broadly diversified. That's just ultimately not the case. You're not achieving that goal if you're trying to diversify. You're not achieving the goal of diversification if you are just trying to put money into different target date funds. And we see that so often when we review 401k plans. Right. This is a very, very common misconception that most people have. Yeah. So what are some other DIY mistakes that you've come across or that we see? Well,
one example that I'll give you actually happened around February or so of this past year, where this person had never worked with a financial advisor before, and they found themselves in what do I want to call this, a pickle.
Bind. Yeah, a pickle.
A pickle. Yeah,
quite a big pickle.
They had a problem come up because they were not married, but their boyfriend at the time passed away. And we've told this story a little bit on one of the other episodes, but she inherited a 401k from her boyfriend. So non-spouse, inherited a 401k. The bank that she was with did roll this to a inherited IRA, in which, due to the Secure Act, she can't stretch that out anymore. She has 10 years to pull all of that money out, which she is doing. So everything there was done correctly. The issue is one of the companies didn't code this or didn't do this correctly, because she did not. It was not coded as a rollover. It was coded as an actual distribution.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Even though she's taking distributions the way she should, she's been paying taxes on those distributions the way she should for the last year. She received I think it was around $129,000 tax bill from the IRS.
Mm-hmm.
We told her this can be fixed. We'll get on the phone with the bank. We'll get on the phone with the other investment company that it was coming from. We'll get on the phone with the tax. She brought it to a tax professional. Was not a CPA, by the way. It was a tax preparer at a larger firm.
One of those you would find in a shopping center.
Yes.
Somewhere,
yeah. So that tax preparer insinuated that, or it was insisting that she was accurate and that the taxes were prepared correctly and that she owed the $129,000. We were trying to explain to her that that was not the case. We can get this corrected. We got her in touch with a CPA, one of our CPAs that we use here, and he confirmed that this could be corrected. Set an appointment up with her, and the next day she went home and canceled all of her appointments and basically said that she was believing what the tax preparers were saying and was going to continue to do this herself and was going to pay the IRS. So that's a pretty big bill. And if you're conscious about your fees that you would pay a financial advisor, but you're willing to just believe the people who have been doing your taxes, what she stated was these are the people that have been doing my taxes for years. So there was trust there, but they were wrong in this instance. And if she ended up paying the IRS, then that's a significant amount of money. And the biggest issue that I see with it, or the biggest problem that she may or may not realize, is she's paying a tax bill and then she's turning around and taking the money out of an IRA and paying taxes again on it. Mm-hmm. So she is definitely paying taxes twice here.
Yeah, and if this is something that if she was willing to pay for professional advice, and her idea of saving a few bucks is costing her a massive amount of money in this case that's going to Uncle Sam. If she would just bite the bullet and admit that maybe she needed some professional help, she would be in such a better financial position than just trying to go it alone at every single turn. And unfortunately, that's a mentality that we see quite a bit. We certainly want to help however we can help, right? But you have to be willing to open yourself up to help. You talked about utilizing, a tax preparer. I don't use I use a CPA.
Correct.
We share a CPA, but we use a CPA professionally because I want someone qualified looking over my stuff, and it's some of the best money that I pay every year. I have zero problem paying for a CPA, paying for professional advice, someone looking over my taxes, over my issues, and making sure that I'm doing everything that I can be doing, not only once during the year while they're preparing my taxes, but throughout the year as I make decisions about where I want to allocate my money,
right, and
what type of tax ramifications that might have. I'm a professional in this business. I still pay for qualified advice,
yep,
as do you. So it's very important, to recognize the value of paying for qualified financial advice and understanding the value that it really can provide ultimately in your overall portfolio. Another example that we see of people trying to go it alone and making some huge, I don't want to say huge errors, but rather some huge omissions within their overall financial plan is the lack of an estate plan. Not doing the work to create a will, to create a revocable living trust. These are just very basic estate planning documents: living wills, financial powers of attorney, healthcare powers of attorney. Most people never even think about all those different. They think, well, I've got a will in place, I'm good to go. They don't understand how having only a will really doesn't achieve the goals that you want to achieve by creating a more comprehensive estate plan.
Right.
And we always talk about the three phases of your life, at least from a financial perspective. The first stage is the accumulation stage, right? You make your money, you're working, you're saving. You're saving your money, you're investing it, you're leaving it alone. The second stage is the income phase, right? Okay, we're living off of the accumulation, the money that we saved during the accumulation phase. We are paying ourselves an income. We are the bank. We become our own bank. The third stage is the legacy stage. That's ultimately when we pass away, and it's an unfortunate fact of life, but, hey, we're all going to die. We all have to prepare for the eventuality that we will not be here one day. Right. Most people, probably don't want to think about that stuff. It's tough to talk about, but it's an unfortunate reality of what we have to deal with in our business. But it's amazing to me the clients that we've worked with to create an estate plan and prepare for that next phase of life, for obviously not themselves, but to prepare their families and set them up in the most optimal way possible. That process it's so much easier when there's an estate plan in place. Right. And that's really one of the biggest things that we see with DIYers is there's no estate plan in place. There's no trust. They don't understand the value of a trust.
And actually, yesterday, that brings up a really good point. Yesterday, I was actually in a meeting, and this is a prospect meeting, so they're not clients yet. We do have another meeting, a follow-up meeting set, but as they were sharing some of their information with me, I pointed out right away that their beneficiaries, there was no beneficiaries on their 401k plans. So the beneficiary, their statement actually says no beneficiary listed. So these two are DIYers. They don't work with a current advisor. They do understand the need that they want to work with an advisor. That's why they're here now.
That's step one.
So yeah, step one. But the first thing that I've noticed by looking at over some of these statements was that beneficiaries were not even there. So I said, even if you decide not to hire us as your financial planners, make sure first thing when you leave here, get online, update your beneficiaries on these accounts, or call these companies if you don't know how to get online there. Get yourself access to it. Update the beneficiaries on these accounts, because if something was to happen, the beneficiaries passed. If there's a beneficiary listed there, that doesn't go to probate. That's a direct pass, and that's another misconception we get all the time. Is wills. We say, well, I just updated my will. People update their will and they don't change their beneficiaries on their accounts. The beneficiaries trump what's in that will. Mm-hmm. That will only dictates what happens for probate when there's assets that are contestable. So, the beneficiaries is important, and a lot of times the DIYers, they don't think that far into it, but it becomes an issue when something does happen to you, and inevitably something happens to everyone. If that's not cleaned up, it becomes a mess for your heirs.
So here's another real life example of where not having an overall comprehensive financial plan in place could have spelled disaster. And this is a very, very, very common thing that we see. Someone that has a rental property, owns rental assets. Maybe they're not necessarily, big shot real estate investors by any means, but maybe they lived in a house previously, they moved to a new one, they kept their old house, and they've been renting it out. We see a lot of that, right? They own one, maybe two rental properties they've accumulated over the years in some way, shape, or form. You get married, you don't sell the house, you move into one, and you rent out the other, right? Very, very common.
Yep.
Just brought on a new client, and that's what they did. He used to dabble in real estate and hasn't in years, but he sold off most of his other portfolios, but he still has this one property he's earning income, he's receiving income on it, and he's owned it for almost 20 years now, and he's for the most part not had it vacant. He's had renters in there. So he understands what he's doing as far as managing a property, so to speak. But he owns that property directly. He doesn't own that property within an LLC. And when I started talking to him, and asking him some questions about the way that he owned that piece of real estate, that property, it never occurred to him that he needed to be treating that as a business. Because if you own a rental property, you own a business. You have a business, and you're receiving income from a source that's not your primary source of income, usually. And there's also liability there. And so when I started talking to him about, if something were to happen on your property, roof caves in, I don't know, somebody trips down some broken steps or something like that, something happens on the property, you own that property, it's ultimately your liability. If you own that directly, there's not any type of a barrier. There's not any type of a wall between you personally and that property that you own professionally. Right. Let's say. So if you have that property as an LLC, if an LLC owns that investment real estate, that's creating a little bit of a barrier there where they're not going to be able to go after your personal assets. They can only go after the assets of the LLC. That's one of the most common. It's such a common mistake that we see with DIYers that come into our doors. And that's usually, and we've already gone through this, and so we've had those discussions, and we're in process now of getting all of that fixed. But in turn, talking about the benefits of owning a trust, then you want to set up a trust, and then the trust owns the LLC. Because ultimately, when you pass away, someone has to retain ownership. Someone has to take control of that business. It ultimately is a business. It's an income-generating asset. And someone needs to be able to take control, take the reins of that business quickly and efficiently. And the only way to do that is by doing the proper estate planning work up front and creating the proper trusts. Anything to add on that?
The one thing I would add on here is, when it comes to the DIY, like you mentioned earlier, you said we are in this industry, but yet we still pay someone to do our taxes. We still prepare our taxes, to file our taxes, for tax advice. We still we work with CPAs with our clients. If they have a CPA or whatnot, if they don't have a CPA, we recommend them to have a CPA so we can work with them on these. I would relate this in our industry. There's people that pay others to come cut their grass. You can cut your grass yourself, right?
Yeah.
But I see there's lawn companies out here that exist for a reason, okay? And they're all over the place. They pay people to paint their house. They pay people to clean their heating and air conditioner, their chimneys, their plumbing, and all of that. I do that as well, because I don't pay somebody to cut my grass. I like to cut my grass, but I do pay someone to clean my HVAC, if I got a plumbing issue, if I've got to clean my chimney out. Not because I'm not handy enough to do some of that stuff, but because I want it done right. And I want to make sure that if there is a problem, if I was to mess something up, then it's on me, right? I've got a bigger issue to fix.
Yeah.
But if there was a problem with the person that was doing it, then I have somebody that I call to come back and fix it or help, figure out why the problem happened in the first place. So, I would urge people to use a financial professional, use a financial advisor. Don't try to do all of this stuff yourself. There are some things that can be done without too much damage if you do enough research and figure that out. But the whole picture, the whole plan of it is a different story.
It's all about risk versus reward. The risk-reward ratio of you screwing up your lawn mowing session is pretty low, right?
Exactly.
But it's amazing to me the amount of people that will pay and outsource things with a very low risk-reward ratio, but they want to handle the things with a very high risk, not necessarily high reward, but a high risk scenario, right? Like their retirement. You only get to retire once, and if you don't do it right when you go to retire, you don't want to put yourself in a position of having to go back to work 10 years after you retire because it wasn't done correctly. And unfortunately, in today's world, in today's economy, that's a reality that so many people are facing right now, and it's a fear. And we're sitting in a position right now where we've, last year we had 9-10% inflation. We're back down right now as we speak. Knock on wood. We're looking at about 5.5% inflation year over year right now, which it's coming down, but that still by no means is very good. By all accounts, we are about to head into a recession. We're sitting here at the beginning of June 2023 as we are recording this. We are heading, in all likelihood, into a recession later in the year. We just had a year last year where the S&P was down over 20%, the NASDAQ was down over 30%. We had a really bad year in the markets last year. If you went to retire 2 years ago and you did not have a properly structured retirement plan and you were trying to do it yourself and you saw the value of your accounts plummet 30% and you don't have a plan for inflation in place, the beginning of your retirement has been extremely stressful. And that's ultimately what you want to avoid. And that's why it pays to farm some of this out and get someone who's professionally qualified to take care of your retirement. Let them do it for you. So number one, it's not always about X's and O's and getting you an extra X percent of return. You were talking about most people equate their plan specifically with their investments when there's so much more to it. But ultimately, it's about peace of mind. can you sleep at night? Can you put your head down on a pillow every night and when you go to sleep, understand and know where your income is going to be coming from tomorrow, the following month, the following year, the following 10 years? Do you know and understand completely where your income is going to come from until the day that you pass away? And if you can't truly answer those questions and understand how your plan takes into account things like inflation, things like taxes, you don't have a plan. And you need to be talking to someone like us. Whether it's us or someone like us, you need to be talking to someone who's professionally qualified to give out that advice. And I think that's probably a pretty good place to wrap it up, as we're about 25 minutes in. We really appreciate you listening and appreciate you watching here with us at The Money Puzzle. If anything that we say today hits home with you and you would like to discuss with us, please give us a call. Visit our website, FWPpartners.com. You can schedule a call directly on our website there. And if you'd like to share this content with anyone else, any friends or family that you feel might benefit from anything that we have to say, we greatly appreciate it. Thanks for watching.